The stars burned cold and bright that night, scattered across the endless black like silent witnesses. But their silence did not last long because the airwaves of every system in the galaxy began to twist and bend under the weight of a single broadcast. A message that forced its way into every screen, every speaker, every comlink from the core worlds to the outer rim. And as it spread like fire through vacuum, the people of Earth stopped breathing. It began with the seal of the Galactic Council, gold and silver spirals turning slowly. Then the faces appeared, alien leaders from dozens of empires, sitting high in their shining chambers, dressed in their war robes and political colors, their heads held high with the kind of confidence that only comes from those who have never been burned. Their voices were cold, proud, and they spoke like executioners, not like equals. One of the elder voices rose first, smooth and heavy, announcing to the entire galaxy that the Council, in full unity, had declared war on Earth and humanity. He said the humans were reckless, violent, unpredictable creatures who had crossed too many lines, who were not civilized enough to hold their place in the stars. And as his voice carried through space, other leaders joined, nodding and echoing their agreement like vultures circling their meal. They called this war a cleansing, a necessary act of protection, a final answer to the human threat. They believed this would be quick. They believed it would be clean. They believed they were unstoppable. They believed wrong. Across Earth, screens flickered to life on every street corner, in every home, in every control room, in the cabins of freighters drifting near the asteroid belt. People froze. Workers stopped what they were doing. Children turned their heads. Soldiers stared at the sky. The Council's fleets filled the background of the broadcast, endless rows of alien warships aligning in cold formation, their metallic bodies glinting like knives waiting to cut. The message spread faster than panic could catch it, and the first wave of fear rippled through the civilian world like a dark wind. But not everyone froze. Not everyone trembled. Beneath the cities, deep under the surface where sunlight could not touch, silent bunkers stirred awake. Lights flickered on in corridors no civilian had ever seen. Old command consoles hummed to life, and the hum grew louder with each passing second. For decades, these places had slept in silence, built in secret, forgotten by most, but now the alarms pulsed not with panic but with purpose. Up above, the Council leaders raised their hands and made their declarations formal, like kings signing the death sentence of a kingdom they believed was too weak to fight back. They spoke of Earth as if it were prey. They laughed without laughing, their words dripping with the quiet arrogance of predators who had never met something stronger. Their fleets were already on the move, sliding through jump gates like a tide that could not be stopped. Thousands of ships cutting through the darkness toward the blue and green world they had decided would fall. They expected fear. They expected surrender. They expected begging. But they did not hear Earth speak. They did not see what was happening beneath the skin of the planet. And they did not understand the smile forming in the shadows. In a forgotten control room under the North American mountains, screens that had not lit up for 40 years came alive, flickering with maps of the solar system and code words written in steel-gray text. A single red line scrolled across the largest screen. Operation Dawn Hunt, activated. The men and women who stood inside that room did not wear bright uniforms or medals. They wore dark clothing, silent faces, eyes like sharpened glass. One of them whispered into the still air, "They finally did it." Another voice answered, "Then we finally get to do it too." At the same time, in a bunker beneath the frozen wastelands of Antarctica, an old siren wailed a single low tone, deep and steady. Giant steel blast doors groaned as they pulled apart for the first time in a generation, revealing tunnels that led to hangars buried in the ice. Lights came on in a slow wave, illuminating massive shapes hidden under sheets of frost. And as the warmth from the newly activated generators spread, the frost began to melt, dripping down the black hulls of warships that no alien in the galaxy knew existed. While the Council broadcast was still echoing across the stars, humanity's real voice was already moving in silence. Everywhere on Earth, the broadcast forced its way into homes, businesses, and cities. In a small apartment in London, a father tightened his grip on his child's hand as the alien fleets filled the screen. In a crowded bar in Sao Paulo, workers who had been laughing minutes ago fell silent, their drinks left untouched. In a quiet farmhouse in Montana, a woman who once wore a uniform stood up slowly, walked to a locked chest, and opened it to reveal a communicator long believed dead. One by one, across the world, people who were not part of armies but had been part of something else, something old and hidden, began to move. The council kept talking, showing their fleets moving through jump gates, showing star maps with Earth marked in bright red like prey. They thought this would break the human spirit. Instead, it did something else. It woke something that had been waiting. Under the oceans, deep in trenches no alien sensor had ever scanned, automated listening stations activated their cores. They began to send encrypted signals bouncing off old relay satellites that the council thought were junk. In orbit, dormant platforms shifted their alignment, slow and quiet, like old predators opening their eyes. The council's voice filled the galaxy with pride and certainty. They did not see the dark smile of a planet that had never once bowed to invaders. In the war rooms beneath Geneva, the central command grid spun to life. A single woman sat at the head of the long table, her eyes calm, her hands still. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to panic. She simply said, "They've started the hunt." And every person in that room knew exactly what that meant. For a century, humanity had listened, watched, prepared. Every insult, every warning, every threat, recorded, analyzed, calculated. For decades they had built weapons not for show, not for parades, but for the day when someone would be foolish enough to believe Earth could be taken. In orbit around the moon, a station hidden behind a veil of old civilian signals shifted its panels and opened a communication channel that no council fleet could detect. Protocol Fenrir engaged, a mechanical voice said. Across the asteroid belt, silent shadows began to move, no engines glowing, no signals showing. These weren't civilian satellites. They were hunters. The council broadcast continued. They called the humans dangerous. They called them reckless. They called them alone. But they did not understand what alone meant when it came to Earth. Humanity had been alone before. Alone had made them smarter. Alone had made them harder. Alone had made them build things the galaxy didn't know existed. As their fleets sailed forward, they imagined victory. But down below, in tunnels where the walls were made of reinforced steel, humanity was already moving chess pieces on a board the council couldn't even see. Civilians looked at their screens with fear, but above their fear something else began to grow. Anger. Defiance. History had taught them what happened when others tried to break them. This time was no different. On the council broadcast, an alien general leaned forward, baring sharp teeth, and said, "Earth will fall in a week." In the shadows of Earth's war rooms, a quiet laugh answered him. In the cold dark of space, where distant objects drift unnoticed, old Terran fleets slept behind false signals and asteroid fields. Their hulls bore no bright flags, no shining paint, just the blackness of the hunt. As the broadcast ended and the alien fleets grew closer, those ships opened their eyes. One by one, their engines came alive with the silent hum of predators waking from hibernation. The council thought they were making history. They didn't know they were starting their own hunt. And as the last line of the broadcast echoed through the stars, "Earth will be erased," the planet they thought was afraid just smiled in the dark, like a hunter who has finally seen its prey step into the trap. The galaxy moved fast after the council's declaration, but Earth moved faster, not with noise or fire but with silence so sharp it cut through the stars like a blade in the dark, and while the alien leaders celebrated in their shining halls, toasting each other with the certainty of an easy victory, hidden doors beneath the surface of Earth swung open and shadows long buried began to breathe again, as if the planet itself had been waiting for this moment, not with fear but with a hunter's patience. In an underground chamber beneath the old mountain ranges of North America, lights flickered on one by one, illuminating walls lined with old steel and silent screens that had not shown a single signal in decades, but now they glowed with movement, streams of code and encrypted transmissions dancing across them like fire. No speeches were made, no alarms were sounded, no broadcast was sent in return. Orders were passed through channels so deep the galaxy had forgotten they existed, and every single one of those orders carried the same message: it's time. At the edges of the solar system, in places where alien scanners believed there was nothing but empty rock, hidden fleets received that message, old but deadly ships wrapped in signal distortions that made them look like dead asteroids. They came alive without lighting the stars, engines whispering instead of roaring, weapons warming in the dark. Deep under the frozen layers of Antarctica, a control center that did not appear on any official map filled with sound as boots hit the metal floor and quiet voices issued old call signs. All systems online, a woman said into a comm line, her voice steady, not a hint of fear, only the kind of cold excitement that hunters feel when the hunt finally begins. Her screen displayed the alien armadas moving towards Sol, their formation tight, perfect, predictable. She smiled. They are walking in a straight line. Around her, technicians and officers worked with the kind of precision that came from years of drilling for a war the rest of the galaxy didn't believe would happen. On another continent, deep beneath an abandoned city, men and women who didn't exist on paper were pulling black cases from hidden vaults, unlocking codes that had slept longer than most of them had been alive, awakening the machine that had been built for this very day. The Council thought Earth had no allies, no armies capable of facing the weight of the galaxy. But Earth's answer wasn't a broadcast. Earth's answer was silence wrapped in steel. Above the moon, in the shadow where no alien telescope could see, a massive command ship unshackled itself from its camouflage, drifting forward with the calm of a creature that has waited too long to feed. The ship's skin reflected nothing. It was made to disappear. All around it, hundreds of vessels that had once been ghost stories to alien intelligence officers began aligning in absolute silence. No signals, no calls, just movement like the first breath of a storm. Humanity had learned long ago that real predators don't roar before the kill. They wait. On Earth's surface, the civilians who watched the Council broadcast had not been given any reassurance yet. The governments said nothing. The news channels whispered rumors. Fear spread like smoke through cities, but in the shadows of that fear, something older and stronger grew. The old veterans who had disappeared after the last wars were suddenly being called. Pilots who had retired decades ago received encrypted coordinates on personal devices they thought were dead. Engineers who had worked on civilian satellites now stared at blueprints that were never meant to be civilian. One by one, people who were never supposed to exist stepped back into the light of their hidden war. Humanity wasn't just ready. Humanity had been waiting. In the depths of the Atlantic, a massive structure shaped like a ring began to hum. It was not a research lab as the Council spies had once believed. It was a control hub, one of the primary relay stations for the Black Net, a communication system that operated outside of known galactic frequencies. It had no vorisprint, no signature. Even the best alien scanners would see only water and noise. But through that silent network, orders were flowing like blood through veins, connecting old fleets, forgotten colonies, off-grid stations, and sleeper cells across the stars. Earth had never trusted the Council, and that distrust had built a war machine no one had ever seen. Far from Earth, hidden deep in the asteroid belt, an old station shaped like a broken rock flared to life. Inside, the crews of the Black Fleet walked out of cryo-sleep, their faces calm, their eyes cold. They were not drafted soldiers. They were wolves trained to kill quietly. A single sentence appeared on their screens. The hunt begins. They moved with perfect synchronization, engines warming up without leaving a trace, shields activating without sound, targeting arrays locking into position not on alien fleets but on their supply lines, their communications, their weak points. The Council had moved like a hammer. Humanity was moving like a scalpel. In the Pacific bunkers, a general with gray hair and a scar across his face stood in front of a wall of screens, watching the alien armadas creep closer to Sol. His voice was low, almost amused, as he said, "They still think they are in control." A woman beside him responded, "They're not used to praise," smiling back. He gave a single nod. The lights in the room shifted from yellow to red as the last lock on the defense systems opened, and somewhere beneath the ocean floor, massive silos began to stir. But these were not missiles. They were launch shafts for something far older, far bigger. The galaxy had always seen Earth as young, loud, reckless. That was the mask humanity had worn well. But now that mask was falling off. In every dark corner of the system, old shadows moved. Drones shaped like drifting junk detached from dead satellites and vanished into black space, carrying eyes and teeth the galaxy didn't know existed. In the frozen wastelands of Mars, underground tunnels that led to hangars the Council thought abandoned filled with footsteps as pilots climbed into fighters that didn't appear on any registry. The command towers of the Black Fleet whispered launch codes. No speeches. No mercy. Just a slow smile spreading through the war machine like a spark through dry grass. The Council thought humanity would panic. But panic was never part of the plan. Earth had survived alone, cornered, outnumbered before. It knew how to wear fear like armor and turn silence into a blade. It didn't need to scream. It didn't need to explain. It was patient. And patience is the most dangerous weapon in any war. In the skies over the Pacific, 3 black ships rose through the clouds without a sound, their surfaces bending light around them, making them vanish as soon as they cleared the stratosphere. They joined a formation of hundreds already hidden among orbital debris, invisible to anyone who wasn't born to find them. On the other side of the solar system, a single message left a relay station buried inside a dead comet. They declared war. Let them. That message reached hidden Terran outposts near the edge of explored space. And there, captains who had lived as shadows for decades began to turn their ships toward home. Across the black, humanity's claws were extending quietly. While the Council roared with pride, Earth smiled wider. The hunt had not started yet, but soon, the hunters would learn they were the prey far from the noise of the Council's victory speeches and their parades of arrogance. The black sky around Mars began to tremble with the slow awakening of something the galaxy had forgotten even existed, buried beneath layers of silence and steel for nearly a century. Something older than the Council's arrogance and far sharper than their fleets, because deep under the red crust of Mars, behind sealed doors and ice-cold hangars, the Black Fleet was opening its eyes, not with alarms, not with loud engines, but with the quiet rumble of power returning to something designed for only one purpose: war without mercy. The first blast doors opened like the jaws of a beast, steam hissing out as rows of colossal ships floated slowly upward, their surfaces dark as the void, swallowing the light instead of reflecting it, their hulls designed to disappear against the backdrop of space. These were not the shiny parade ships of the Council, meant to intimidate with size and noise. These were hunters, sharpened for silence, built for strikes that left no echo. In control rooms buried in the rock, technicians and officers moved like shadows, pressing commands with the precision of people who had trained their whole lives for a moment that was never supposed to happen. Lines of green light lit up across walls of screens as old codes were entered, codes that hadn't been spoken aloud since the fleets were sealed away. In the command bay of the flagship, a single voice spoke through the silence: "Black Fleet is awake," and those 4 words traveled through encrypted networks, reaching every hidden ship in every hidden corner of the system like a knife sliding through soft fabric. Above the asteroid belt, dozens of silent objects that the Council believed were nothing more than abandoned mining stations flickered to life. Panels unfolded. Weapons systems powered up with a faint hum. Engines that had been cold for generations began to warm like sleeping beasts sniffing blood in the wind. They had hidden in plain sight, letting dust and rumors cover them while the galaxy grew soft and loud. But now every sensor, every array, every black eye pointed toward the incoming Council fleets. Across the solar system, stations disguised as wreckage turned and faced the stars, their targeting systems aligning like wolves turning their heads toward a single scent. In the command center on Earth, deep underground beneath reinforced layers of steel and concrete, the screens displayed the movement of the Council's armadas, vast, glittering, arrogant, and overlaid on top of those bright enemy formations was something the aliens could not see: the growing shape of the Black Fleet. Lines of Terran warships stretched across the darkness in tight, clean formations, not wide and scattered like the Council's messy display of numbers, but quiet, coiled, like a blade waiting to strike. Generals and tacticians watched in silence, their faces lit by the cold glow of the screens. No one was panicking. No one was shouting. They were watching their trap take shape, and in their silence there was something far more dangerous than anger. There was certainty. Near Titan, under a moon cloaked in storms, an entire shipyard that had been erased from every official record opened its domes. Massive cruisers, their hulls wrapped in stealth plating, emerged from black bays. They had never been counted, never been scanned, never been noticed. Even the Council's intelligence networks, bloated and proud, had no idea they existed. That was the first mistake the aliens made. They believed what they could not see did not exist. But humanity had learned long ago that the best way to win a war is to build your blade in the dark and never show it until it's already at the enemy's throat. Inside the flagship, a command officer ran his hand along the cold black metal of the control rail, feeling the ship come alive beneath him like a living creature. He had served for years without seeing sunlight, training for this single moment. His crew, hundreds of men and women, strapped into their stations, eyes locked on their displays. The captain walked to the command seat and lowered himself into it slowly, his expression calm. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. Everyone on board already knew what this moment was. With one single gesture, he unlocked the fleet's combat AI, and thousands of targeting systems across dozens of hidden sectors came online in perfect synchronization. Back on Earth, in the old war room where the woman with iron-gray hair commanded the entire operation, a soft tone echoed through the chamber. One of her officers turned and said, "Black Fleet is in position." She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just whispered, "Good. Let them come." Around her, massive tactical maps unfolded across the displays, showing both the alien fleets and the hidden Terran armadas. The Council thought they were marching toward a frightened world. What they didn't know was that they were sailing straight into a black sea filled with predators. In orbit around Neptune, old satellites disguised as broken relics opened like flowers, revealing missile pods and rail systems that could cut through starships like knives through flesh. Human engineers had buried these weapons under centuries of misdirection. And while alien fleets believed they were advancing, they were already being watched, tracked, and surrounded without even realizing it. In the silence of space, Terran ships began to drift from their hiding spots, their engines whispering like hunters gliding through tall grass. No flare, no beacon, no broadcast, just a quiet, growing darkness spreading across the map. On the front line of the Council's armada, alien captains sat in their shining bridges, laughing at the idea of human resistance, confident in their overwhelming numbers. Their scanners reported nothing. Their maps showed an easy march. But the truth was already wrapping around them. Far beyond their detection range, the Black Fleet had formed its perimeter like a tightening noose. They were moving with the kind of precision that no Council fleet had ever faced before, not because of advanced technology alone, but because humanity had prepared for this very day for 100 years. Every angle, every shadow, every jump point, they knew it. In the cold vacuum near Pluto, the first wave of Terran destroyers lined up in perfect formation, their weapons systems locking quietly onto targets that didn't even know they were being hunted. Their hulls reflected nothing. They were ghosts in the dark. Inside one of the ships, a young pilot stared at the red line on his display, the Council's forward fleet, and whispered under his breath, "They have no idea." His co-pilot answered, "They will." The countdown began, not on open channels, not on any frequency the aliens could hear, but in encrypted pulses that only the Black Fleet could feel. On the other side of the galaxy, the Council still believed they were dealing with a weak and loud species, the kind that yells when it's cornered. But Earth was not yelling. Earth was smiling. In every command station, every ship, every hidden base, people were breathing quietly, waiting for the moment when the galaxy would learn what it meant to declare war on a predator that had been forced to play prey for far too long. And as the last warship cleared the Martian underground hangar and joined the dark formation in space, a single silent pulse rippled through the fleet. One signal, one command. The hunt had begun. The alien armadas swept across the void like a wall of light and steel, thousands of ships moving in perfect formation, their commanders laughing in their glittering bridges, confident that humanity was already cornered, already broken, already praying for mercy that would never come. But what they did not know was that they were not marching toward a battle. They were walking into a trap older than their arrogance, crafted in silence while they bragged loudly, and as the first wave of their fleets reached the edge of the Sol system, the stars themselves seemed to shift, though none of their scanners caught it. Their long-range sensors returned nothing. No heat signatures. No fleets. No defenses. Just quiet space and a small blue world waiting in the dark. They thought this was going to be easy, that Earth would scramble weak ships and beg for negotiation. But the galaxy had forgotten what happens when a hunter plays prey too well. In the deep black near the Kuiper belt, Hidden beneath layers of distortion and false signals, the Black Fleet waited, engines cold, weapons hot, crews silent, hands hovering over systems that had been designed for one thing: to erase arrogance. The alien commanders began to broadcast their final approach. Great war horns echoed through the comm lines, alien languages dripping with victory before a single shot had been fired. They talked of conquest, of power, of breaking Earth's will in a single strike. They didn't know that the humans listening on the other side of the void weren't frightened. They were smiling. On the bridge of the Terran flagship, the captain sat in his chair with his hands folded calmly, listening to their open channel boasting with the quiet amusement of a predator watching prey celebrate before it's caught. Around him, the crew didn't move nervously. They moved with the still precision of soldiers who had trained for a moment that wasn't a possibility. It was destiny. "They are blind," one of the officers whispered. "They don't even know we're here." The captain leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving the map of glowing red dots representing the enemy. "Good," he said softly. "Let them keep talking." Then the moment came. The first alien scout fleet broke formation to sweep toward Neptune, sending out ping after ping into the dark, trying to provoke Earth's defenses. None answered. They grew bolder. More ships pushed forward, like wolves stepping into a clearing where they thought the prey had fled. And then, like a quiet ripple through the void, the Black Fleet moved. Not all at once. Not with roaring engines. But with the soft, perfect precision of blades sliding out of their sheaths. A single Terran corvette, its hull invisible against the black, drifted from its hiding place and locked onto the first scout cruiser. They never saw it coming. No energy spike. No visible light. Just a pulse of compressed kinetic energy that cut through the cruiser like it was made of paper. One moment the alien crew was laughing. The next, their ship split clean in half, its pieces spinning silently into the dark. Before the enemy could react, the second shot came. Then the third. A dozen cruisers vanished from the scanners in less than 20 seconds. Panic didn't come immediately, because their computers told them nothing was there. Their fleets began to spread, searching for an enemy they couldn't see, but the more they spread, the faster they died. Terran destroyers struck in absolute silence, black hulls appearing and vanishing like shadows, firing precision shots that didn't explode. They killed. Entire formations evaporated into debris fields before a single alarm finished echoing through the alien fleet. On one alien command ship, a young officer screamed to his admiral that their ships were being picked off by ghosts, but the admiral barked back that it was impossible, that humans didn't have this kind of power. He was still shouting when his ship vanished under the impact of a rail spear that punched through 6 decks and left nothing but silence behind. Back on Earth, deep inside the war room, the generals watched the kill markers flash across their screens. Red dots disappeared from the map like a candle flame being crushed by fingers. No cheering filled the room. No one clapped. They simply watched. Cold. Focused. Efficient. In orbit around Pluto, one Terran battlecruiser turned slowly, its targeting systems locking on to the second wave of alien ships still flying blind into the dark. The captain raised his hand, then lowered it. Dozens of heavy guns fired in perfect rhythm, invisible in the void, their rounds cutting through enemy cruisers like invisible scythes. The alien fleet tried to pull back, tried to recalibrate their scanners, but every time they adjusted, the humans shifted position again, faster than their sensors could keep up. This was not a war. This was a hunt. The Council's command net erupted with screams and static. Admirals barked orders to regroup, but their lines were already broken. Ships collided with their own allies in the confusion, firing into the empty dark, desperate to hit something they couldn't see. The humans didn't give them that chance. Strike teams of Terran interceptors slipped between their capital ships, laying down traps, jammers, and tracking spores that turned the entire formation into a maze of their own failure. The alien admirals began to realize, one by one, that they had underestimated something far worse than a loud species. They had underestimated silence. They had underestimated patience. They had underestimated Earth. In the void behind the collapsing fleet, a massive shadow stirred. The Terran flagship, larger than any single ship the Council believed existed, emerged slowly from its cloak, its black hull devouring starlight. When the alien fleets finally detected it, it was already too late. A single command left the Terran flagship in a calm voice. Begin the first wave. All across the system, Terran warships revealed themselves not with fanfare but with death. Energy spikes bloomed like ghostly flowers as the hidden armadas that had waited in silence surrounded the alien fleet from every angle. They had not walked into Earth's territory. They had walked into Earth's jaws. In one final desperate push, an alien battleship fired blindly into the dark, unleashing a wave of plasma meant to light the void, but the humans had already moved. In return, the Terran response came like a knife through glass. A synchronized strike from 50 warships, every shot hitting exactly where it needed to. The alien battleship didn't explode in a glorious flash. It simply went dark, its lights fading like the breath of a dying animal. Across the command net of the Council fleet, panic finally bloomed. They screamed for reinforcements. They screamed for retreat. They screamed for answers. But the galaxy had never heard Earth scream back. All it heard was silence and the quiet rhythm of hunters tearing through prey that thought it was a predator. In the Terran war room, the woman with iron-gray hair leaned forward over the glowing map, watching their victory unfold in precise, brutal steps. They thought they were coming for a war, she said softly. They walked into an extermination. And in the cold black between the stars, as the last of the alien scouts disappeared beneath the invisible storm, the only thing left was the echo of Earth's silence and the quiet, patient smile of a species that had waited too long to show its teeth. The hunt had begun in truth now, and the galaxy would never forget the night when the Council declared war and Earth didn't roar. It smiled. Inside the towering halls of the Galactic Council, where light always burned bright and every wall was built to make power feel eternal, a quiet unease began to spread like smoke that no one wanted to acknowledge, the kind of fear that doesn't scream but whispers behind polished doors. And though the admirals and governors wore their grand robes, decorated in the symbols of their victorious fleets, their eyes told the truth their mouths refused to speak, because the fleets that were supposed to march over Earth like a storm had gone silent. Communication streams were broken. Entire armadas that had left their home sectors with laughter and confidence were no longer answering calls, and the first reports that reached the Council chamber were nothing but static and fragmented voices filled with panic. Voices that cracked with disbelief, whispering about invisible ships and black shadows moving through the stars, killing without warning. At first, the Council tried to laugh it off. They told themselves that the humans must have used some desperate last-stand tactic, that the reports were exaggerated, that their fleets would regroup, but the silence grew heavier with every passing hour, and now the largest war room in the galaxy was filled with shaking hands and tight jaws. On the grand screen in the center, red lights blinked where fleets should have been green. Entire task forces erased like they had never existed. The Council leader, an alien with silver plates down his spine and a voice like gravel, slammed his clawed hand on the table, demanding answers from his admirals. They shuffled, they stammered, they brought forward shaky intelligence fragments that made no sense. One admiral whispered that their ships were being hit by something they couldn't detect, that the humans were not fighting like a desperate species. They were hunting like predators who knew exactly where every ship was hiding. Another commander mentioned entire formations being ripped apart before their ships had even managed to lock onto a single target. Every word felt like acid on their pride. For generations, the Council had believed humans to be noisy, reckless, technologically behind, always late to the table of power. They had mocked Earth in every chamber. They had called them the wild dogs of the spiral arm. Now those same dogs were tearing through fleets built over centuries like they were nothing. As the Council argued, holographic projections flickered to life showing what little footage had been recovered from the wreckage. Black shapes sliding through the void like ghosts. Rail rounds tearing through capital ships in perfect, surgical strikes. Plasma shields failing in seconds. In the background of one recording, an alien captain's final transmission played on loop, his voice broken with disbelief. "They're not defending, they're hunting us." That sentence hung in the air like a blade. No one spoke after it ended. No one laughed. Not anymore. On another screen, logistics reports scrolled down like a waterfall of blood. 37 fleets had been deployed toward the Sol system. 12 hadn't even made it past the outer perimeter. 5 had been completely wiped out. The rest were scattered, fleeing in panic, retreating without permission. Entire generals who had sworn victory now refused to respond to calls. In the chamber, the once proud councillors, who had raised their hands to declare war with loud speeches, now lowered their eyes. The enemy they had imagined wasn't real anymore. The humans they thought they knew didn't exist. In their place was something cold, patient, and terrifying. As panic began to break through the walls of pride, the council's emergency channels filled with arguments. Some screamed to send reinforcements. Others demanded a retreat. Some said it was a trick. Some said it was the end. The council leader roared for silence, but even his voice could not drown the fear spreading through the room. One of his advisors stepped forward, shaking, holding a report that came from the edge of the system. His voice cracked as he read it aloud. "They didn't engage us with a fleet," he said. "They surrounded us with a net. They cut off supply lines before we even reached Earth. They knew exactly where we'd be. They're not responding to our calls because they don't need to. We're not the hunters. We're the prey." The room fell into absolute silence, the kind of silence that suffocates. All their speeches, all their laughter, all their arrogance had turned to dust in a single night. They had declared war expecting a weak opponent who would cry and crumble. Instead, they had found something they couldn't understand, something that didn't warn, didn't shout, didn't broadcast. It simply waited, and when the time came, it struck with precision that no empire in the galaxy had ever faced. The council leader stared at the blinking red lights on the map, his jaw locked, his hands trembling despite the strength he pretended to have. "How?" he whispered. "How did they do this?" But no one had an answer. Meanwhile, far away from their glittering chamber, human fleets moved through the dark like wolves in the woods. They didn't celebrate. They didn't broadcast their victory. They didn't need to. Their ships moved with the calm of predators who had done this before and would do it again. Alien distress calls bounced through the void unanswered. Some of the surviving alien captains were already abandoning their ships, fleeing into the dark, hoping to escape the unseen hunters. But there was nowhere to run. The Black Fleet controlled the shadows now, and in the shadows, Earth was king. Back in the council chamber, a young councillor stood up and shouted that they should surrender, that humanity was too dangerous, that they had awakened something that should have been left alone. The room exploded with noise, with shouting, with denial. But beneath the shouting was something that none of them could bury: the truth. The galaxy had declared war on a species that had built its war machine in silence. The galaxy had expected a frightened voice and received only a smile. And as the council members screamed at one another, outside their capital world, their remaining fleets were already beginning to break formation as the humans closed in. It was no longer a war of strategy. It was a hunt. And they were already in the jaws of the hunter in the heart of deep space where the galactic armadas once stretched like a river of light. The battlefield was no longer a contest of strength but the stage of a slow and merciless slaughter, because now the full weight of the Black Fleet had moved, no longer lurking in the dark but surrounding the alien forces from every direction, squeezing them with the precision of a predator closing its jaws. And the great fleets of the Galactic Council, once so proud and loud, now drifted in broken formation like a wounded beast bleeding into the void. Their polished ships cracked open by railfire that struck before their scanners could even finish processing. Alien admirals shouted orders through comms that were choked with static and screams, their voices rising higher and higher as they tried to bring control to chaos. But there was no control left, only the soundless advance of the Terran war machine. The sky around them had turned black, not because the stars were gone but because human ships moved between them, invisible until the moment their guns spoke, and when they spoke, something died. The first capital ship to fall was the pride of the Vrakesh Empire, a floating fortress the size of a small moon, its hull lined with layers of energy shields believed to be impenetrable. The Council had bragged about this ship for decades, calling it a symbol of strength, a weapon that no race could match. But the Terran fleet didn't fight it with loud bombardments. They hunted it like a beast. First they isolated it, cutting the escorts away with surgical strikes, silent and fast, not giving anyone time to react. Then they killed its engines. Then they fired a single round from a weapon no alien had ever seen, a kinetic spear that tore straight through the forward shields as if they were mist. In seconds the ship was dead, its lights flickering like the last breath of something that had just realized it was not a predator at all. One shot. One fortress gone. Panic began to crawl through the Council's remaining ships like a living thing, and their mighty formations cracked further. Terran destroyers moved through the wreckage like shadows, gliding silently past drifting corpses of starships. They didn't charge, they didn't waste time on drawn-out dogfights. They struck in quick, brutal patterns: ambush, kill, vanish. The alien fleets fired into empty space, plasma and light flashing across the void, but their enemy was never where they fired. They were firing at ghosts. "We can't see them," one alien captain screamed into his comms before his ship disappeared from every scanner, shredded by a barrage of invisible rounds. Another fleet commander tried to rally what was left of their cruisers, calling for a united stand, but his signal was cut short by the Terran flagship's guns. A single broadside erased him and everything around him. In the command center of the Terran flagship, there was no chaos, no shouting, no fear. Officers moved with quiet precision, each one a part of a machine that had trained for this exact moment. Red lights glowed softly across the bridge, illuminating the captain's calm face as he watched alien fleets collapse in real time. "Next formation," he said in a low, almost gentle voice. New targeting lines slid across the holographic map, locking on to the second wave of alien dreadnoughts that were trying to retreat. The captain raised two fingers. "Engage." Across the black, the human fleet moved as one. The alien retreat turned to a massacre. One of the Council's admirals, an ancient reptilian creature with a voice like thunder, roared through the comm net for all remaining fleets to fall back, to regroup, to get out of Sol. But their hyperlanes were already blocked. Their escape routes were already gone. Long before the Council had declared war, Earth had mapped every single route into and out of the system, and the moment the fleets had entered, Terran forces had sealed them behind invisible nets of stealth mines and interdiction fields. The aliens didn't just lose control of the battle. They were trapped inside the jaws of something that had been waiting for them to struggle. Ships that tried to jump out exploded in flashes of blue light as their drives failed against Terran jammers. In the chaos, alien fighters swarmed like insects, trying to protect what was left of their flagships, but even they found no mercy. Terran interceptors moved in tight formations, faster, sharper, flying with a precision that alien pilots had never faced. Their ships didn't scream with energy. They didn't flash with shields. They simply slid through the enemy like blades. Fighter wings that had once been called unstoppable were cut down in seconds. One alien pilot gasped over the comms, "They're not fighting like soldiers, they're hunting like predators." And then his voice went silent as his ship vanished from the map. The Council's grand battle formations, the same ones they had used to conquer dozens of weaker civilizations, were collapsing piece by piece. One dreadnought after another went dark. Command ships disappeared. Fleets stopped responding. Their once overwhelming numbers meant nothing against an enemy that controlled every inch of the space around them. Terran ships moved like a pack of wolves, never scattered, never hesitant, always coordinated, always patient. Every time the aliens tried to form a line, the humans ripped through it. Every time they tried to regroup, the humans split them apart again. Their strength became their trap. Their pride became their coffin. Far from the battlefield, on Earth, the war rooms were lit with soft blue light, maps flickering with the slow, systematic destruction of the invaders. Generals stood around the table, not cheering, not celebrating, only watching with the calm of people who knew how this story would end from the moment the Council made their declaration. One of them whispered, "They never understood," and another answered, "They will, at the end." Back in the void, as the last line of alien battleships struggled to retreat toward the edges of the system, the Terran fleet shifted formation. From the black, the largest warship ever built by humans emerged, the Dreadnought-class Leviathan, its hull swallowing entire constellations in its shadow. The moment it appeared, the alien fleet hesitated. Even without firing a shot, its presence crushed what was left of their morale. The Terran captain stood on its bridge, eyes fixed on the blinking red signatures of enemy flagships. He gave a single order: end it. The final volley came like a storm. Thousands of coordinated strikes rained down on the remaining alien ships, each one a surgical blow aimed to end resistance quickly. It wasn't chaos. It was art. Cold, brutal, merciless. And as the last alien dreadnought cracked in half, spinning silently into the dark, the comm net of the Council fleets filled with quiet, broken voices, whispers of disbelief, of fear, of regret. They had declared war expecting a fight they could control. They found a hunter that didn't negotiate. When the silence finally fell, the stars around Sol were littered with the drifting carcasses of what had once been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Human ships moved among the wreckage like silent wolves, their weapons still hot but their movements calm. There was no victory speech. There was no mercy. The hunt wasn't over, not until the last Council world realized what they had unleashed. And as the Leviathan turned slowly toward the jump lanes, preparing to take the war to the Council's doorstep, the captain's final words to his crew were quiet, almost a whisper. "Now," he said, "they'll understand why we smiled." In the shining heart of the Galactic Council's capital world, where towers of glass stretched high above the clouds and the streets below pulsed with the pride of an empire that had ruled unchallenged for centuries, the silence that now filled the air was nothing like the arrogance that had once echoed through those halls. It was the silence of people who knew something was coming and could not stop it, the silence of a predator's breath against the back of their necks, the silence of a storm. Already inside the walls, Council guards marched through the corridors in stiff, nervous formations, their armor clicking against the polished floors, their movements fast and tense. They had received the first confirmed reports an hour earlier. The great armadas were gone, not broken in honorable combat, not scattered in long war, but erased like chalk in the rain. The proud fleets that had stretched across the stars were now nothing but cold debris floating around Sol. And the message Earth had finally sent was only one word: hunt. No demands. No negotiation. No mercy. The same Council that had roared their war declaration with cameras flashing now sat behind sealed doors, their voices cracking as they tried to find excuses, plans, anything to hide the fear crawling through their bones. Inside the grand chamber, once a symbol of absolute control, the light panels flickered slightly as the room filled with every leader from the great empires. Their robes and medals, meant to make them look invincible, now looked like costumes for a play that had already ended. The Council leader pounded the table, his claws scraping deep grooves into the surface, demanding answers that no one could give him. One of his advisors stammered out casualty reports, the numbers sounding like fiction, the scale of the defeat too impossible to accept. Fleets numbering in the tens of thousands, gone without leaving enough wreckage to count properly. Another stuttered through descriptions of the human tactics: stealth, precision, speed, brutality, none of which matched their intelligence reports because they had no intelligence, they had only arrogance. An admiral from the Zesh Dominion screamed that it was impossible, that no species could build something that vast without the Council knowing, and then went silent when everyone stared at him with hollow eyes because the evidence was already in their faces. They didn't know because they had never believed humans could be dangerous. One of the generals, his scales dark with shame, whispered, "They didn't defend. They waited. They planned." The words hit the room like a slow, heavy hammer. Another councillor slammed his fist on the table and barked that they had to retaliate, to gather what remained of the outer fleets and launch everything toward Earth. But an aide rushed in breathless, shaking, and dropped the latest transmission on the table. Human ships, thousands of them, had already left Sol, crossing into Council-controlled space with speed no one thought possible. They weren't waiting. They weren't hiding. They were coming. A cold weight settled over the room. For centuries, the Council had been the wolf in the dark. Every other species had been prey. But now the roles were reversed, and they all felt it in their bones. Somewhere deep inside, they knew the truth. They weren't dealing with a desperate species. They were dealing with a hunter that had built its blade in silence, and now that blade was aimed at their throats. Above the capital world, the sky began to shift as the first sensors picked up distortions near the edge of the system. Dozens of defense ships scrambled to intercept, but the images came in clear. Terran warships emerging from cloak, black as a starless void, engines whispering, formation tight and silent. The Council's strongest defense fleet, the pride of their core world, prepared to meet them, and their admirals shouted orders as if numbers would save them, as if shouting could stop the storm. But their fleets were soft, predictable, used to striking weak enemies. The Terrans were not weak. They moved like a wall of shadow and fire. As the first human ships entered firing range, the Council's command channels erupted in frantic chatter, desperate admirals giving contradictory orders. The human response was a single coordinated strike. It was fast. It was surgical. It was brutal. Entire wings of the Council's defense fleet disappeared in the opening volley, their wreckage still burning in orbit before the admirals even finished their first orders. Panic spread through the ranks like infection. The humans advanced without slowing down, their formation cutting through the core defense like a knife through silk. On the surface of the capital, alarms began to scream, echoing through the city's polished towers, drowning the usual hum of trade and arrogance. Civilians looked to the skies and saw the black shapes growing larger, blotting out stars they thought would always shine. Council soldiers rushed to defensive positions that had never been used in real war. The leaders who had once called Earth reckless were now shouting for someone, anyone, to protect them. But there was no one left. Their fleets had died believing in their own invincibility, and now the Predator was at their door. In the Grand Chamber, the Council leader stared at the screen as the Terran flagship came into orbit. The image alone silenced every voice in the room. It was bigger than anything they had imagined, a monster of steel and shadow, its hull still scarred from the slaughter at Sol, moving slowly, confidently, like something that knew it could not be stopped. The Council leader gripped the edge of the table, his voice shaking as he whispered, "We thought they were prey." And in that moment, every person in that room understood the weight of their mistake. Outside, the human fleet began its final descent into the system, warships surrounding the capital like a closing fist. No ultimatums. No diplomatic channels. Just the quiet hum of war engines that sounded like death itself. For the first time in its long and proud history, the Galactic Council realized that this was not a war they could win. This was a reckoning. The same smile they had ignored in their arrogance was now the smile of the hunter standing in their house. The sky above the Galactic Council's capital burned black, not with smoke, not with flames, but with the slow, terrifying arrival of the Terran fleet, a wall of warships so massive and silent that the stars themselves seemed to vanish behind them, and below that endless shadow, the once untouchable capital world trembled for the first time in its long, arrogant history. Every tower, every polished street, every council monument that once stood as a symbol of power now stood small beneath the presence of a predator that no longer hid in the dark. The council had declared war with cameras flashing and the galaxy watching, expecting fear, expecting begging, expecting weakness. What they received was silence. What they faced now was the living weight of that silence, carried on black hulls and cold engines that did not roar, they whispered. And that whisper felt louder than any war cry the galaxy had ever heard. Terran ships surrounded the planet like a tightening noose, forming a perfect circle with no gaps, no escape routes, no blind spots. Their formations moved like clockwork, precise, deliberate, unstoppable. In the Grand Chamber, the leaders of the great empires huddled together like frightened children in royal robes, their voices cracking as they demanded plans from admirals who no longer had fleets to give. Outside their walls, the Council's last defense lines were disintegrating in real time. Every minute, another wing fell, another ship went dark, another citywide alarm joined the endless chorus that now echoed through the streets below. The civilians of the capital looked up and saw not a foreign enemy, but a dark horizon that stretched across the heavens like the end of everything they had ever believed in. These were not loud invaders. They were not messy or desperate. They were hunters, and they had come to collect what was owed. In orbit, the Terran flagship moved into final position, its monstrous silhouette cutting across the sun. The bridge inside was silent except for the soft hum of power flowing through the vessel. Officers stood at their posts, faces lit in red light, calm, cold, exact. At the center, the Terran commander stood with his hands behind his back, looking down at the capital world through the reinforced glass of the viewing deck. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. Target locks confirmed, one of the officers said quietly. Planetary shields are down. Another voice followed. Enemy defense grid is gone. The commander closed his eyes for a single breath, then opened them again. "Broadcast it," he said. Across every frequency, every network, every channel that the Council had once used to declare war, a single Terran transmission went out. No speeches, no excuses, no diplomacy, just a voice, steady and cold. "You declared war on humanity," the voice said. "You thought we would run. You thought we would kneel. You thought we would break. You were wrong." Those words fell like a blade across the entire galaxy, reaching not just the Council but every world that had watched their arrogance and believed their lies. "We did not come to beg," the voice continued. "We came to finish the hunt." Inside the Grand Chamber, every leader froze. It wasn't just the words. It was the calm behind them, the calm of something that had already won. One of the younger councillors stood, shouting desperately, "We can negotiate." But no one listened, because they all knew that this was far beyond negotiation now. They had made the declaration. Humanity had simply answered. A roar of panic echoed from outside as the first Terran dropships entered the atmosphere, moving like shadows through the clouds, sleek and black, silent even as they descended. Anti-air batteries tried to fire, but Terran ships cut them down before the first volley finished. Entire defense sectors fell in seconds. In the streets of the capital, people ran as the sky turned darker, not from fire but from the sheer mass of ships above them. Terran Marines in black armor hit the ground with perfect coordination, moving like a wave. They didn't shout. They didn't need to. Every step they took carried the message clearly enough. The Council guards fired in panic, not formation, and were erased before they could reload. No chaos. No mess. Just precision. Humanity had waited for this war. The galaxy had just arrived late to its own defeat. In the chamber, alarms screamed. Someone tried to activate an escape route. Someone else shouted for surrender. But when the heavy doors at the end of the hall slid open, and a unit of Terran soldiers entered in perfect formation, the shouting died instantly. Their boots echoed across the marble floor, a slow, deliberate rhythm that sounded more final than any weapon. Behind them walked a single figure in a dark command uniform, the Terran commander, his presence cutting through the room like a blade through silk. The council leader tried to speak, his voice shaking, "You can't," but the commander's eyes silenced him before he could finish. He walked to the center of the room and stopped. The council leaders looked at him as if looking at the end of their world, because that's exactly what they were seeing. He spoke in the same voice that had echoed through the galaxy minutes earlier, calm and heavy. "You declared war," he said. "Now you live with the consequences." Around the chamber, the walls shook with the distant thunder of Terran ships locking into full planetary control. The council leader fell back into his chair, realizing what everyone else in that room already knew. There would be no mercy. Outside, the last of the council's ships were forced to the ground or reduced to burning fragments. The defense grid that had been considered the most powerful in the galaxy was nothing more than smoke and memory. Above it all, the Terran fleet hung in orbit like a silent crown of steel. There was no cheering on the human channels, no celebration, no wild victory cries. Humanity didn't need glory. Humanity had won the only way predators win, by surviving long enough to strike first and last. The commander stepped closer to the council leader and leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper that cut sharper than a scream. "This," he said, "is what happens when prey forgets what hunts in the dark." The leader's lips trembled, his proud shoulders slumped, the weight of centuries of arrogance finally crushing him into silence. Outside the chamber, Terran banners began to rise on the towers that had once belonged to the Council, not as a show of vanity, but as a warning. Across the galaxy, every world that had watched Earth with mockery now watched in silence, realizing the unthinkable truth. Humanity hadn't just survived the war. Humanity owned it. The Council's reign had ended not with a grand speech, not with peace, but with a quiet, steady smile from the species they thought was too small to matter. And as the commander turned and walked out of the chamber, the soldiers following in perfect silence, the galaxy understood one thing with terrifying clarity. When Earth smiles, it isn't kindness. It's the hunt ending.